So in my stupid ass video about dating advice for ISFJ and INFJ males, I had this comment from the homie Nora that basically said, "Hey, you freaking bastard, do one for INFJ women!" And then I thought to myself, are you freaking kidding me? Are you trying to get me in trouble? But in all seriousness, I was pretty hesitant to do this given my abysmal knowledge about women, but then three things helped change my mind. First, when I made a poll about this, a vast majority of you said it was totally cool. Second, I came across this video of a lecture by Matthew Hussey, a guy. And what struck me was not about what he says, but the fact that so many women were in the audience and willing to listen to his advice. So what I thought was, if things like that occur, then I could definitely offer some advice as well, right? And third, I stumbled upon this video by Pukoki, ruminating over whether or not people like her are too difficult to love because of several particular factors that she articulates during the course of her video. So I thought, okay, this is perfect. I mean, not her situation, but what she said sort of helps me figure out what I wanted to say over here. So let's do that. By the way, what's Pukoki's real name? Emily Elizabeth Barnes. Oh wow, what a coincidence. I was actually watching Clifford the Big Red Dog with my baby nephew the other day. Okay, let's be serious right here. So in contrast with my other video about my ISFJ, INFJ male friends, it seems as if this video will be more conversational. I sort of wanted this discourse to be as if I was talking to a confidant, if you will. So I figured I would just put in some random stock videos of nature while I ramble a whole bunch of thoughts, and maybe you'll get something out of it. Okay, so how do I want to start this off? INFJ females. They're pretty cool to be around. They can introduce a bunch of ideas that I haven't considered. For some reason are seen as ideal females for teenage boys with a 3.93 GPA who are also in the robotics team, who have no idea what the hell they want in a relationship yet. They're constantly being told that they're the world's rarest personality type. Okay, I suppose we'll start there. So, I suppose to have a more effective conversation, we want to momentarily abandon the INFJ label. We also want to momentarily abandon any label that we associate ourselves with and everything that it implies. Why do we do that? My thinking is that because when things don't happen in the way that we predict it to go, or if something happens that we feel that we are responsible for, yeah, we might blame ourselves. But upon reflection, we tend to look for some axiom to shift the negative emotion to because we're naturally averse to pain. The axiom can be many things. It can be an identity, it can be a belief, it can be an occupation, and so on and so forth. There's nothing wrong with that, but in this case, if we find ourselves feeling a type of way because we are one of the 16 personality types, then there are a lot of things that we are overlooking. And I know you INFJ females understand this on a pretty good level, so I'm just establishing this to provide some foundation for this conversation. And I also want to talk about two more things that I want to say before we go any further. One, I feel the need to address this question. Why does this video focus on INFJ females if I just said to abandon the label? Well, you got me there, and it's extremely difficult to work around this glaring irony, and to be honest, I haven't really figured out how to get out of that. So I suppose the best offer of compromise that I can come up with is making this video go out to any female that has this particular cognitive stack, or the inherent conflict, or maybe a similar set of experiences. But I want to focus on the inner conflict and not delve too much, if at all, about the functions. I will definitely allude to them, but I will try not to refer to them outright. That's because the focus is on you as a human, and as a human, you are enough. Number two, some of the things that I will bring up might touch upon subjects that will be difficult to take in, either conceptually or emotionally. Just know that I'm exploring this with the intent to understand, and there is to be no judgment cast on anyone in this video. In fact, I can't judge you because I personally can't know everything about you, nor do I really find it my business to do so. It would be premature and disingenuous if I were to do that at any point. So with all of that said, let's move forward. So the very first thing that I wanted to address is your own mind. It's a pretty creative inner world. It's whimsical, it's dreamlike, it delves far into the future, and while your visions have an underlying humanitarian element, your mind also has a certain analytical slant. It can look at a metric fuckton of ideas and then just treat it as if it was one main one. I can imagine that it's a beautiful inner world, but in my experiences in some social circles, I can safely say that the capacity for future thinking and grandiose visions would also tend to work against you. I can only take a shot here and guess that if something were to not work out, your mind has a way of taking those visions and ideals and ask you constantly about why you haven't achieved those yet. And your answer of "it takes time," even though it's a true and legitimate reason for your situation, it doesn't feel like it's enough. And I can only imagine how that translates into the social world, and I sort of want to convey this idea in question form. Are you hesitant on deepening your current relationships because they will also think you're not enough? Do you have some struggle creating space between the conflicts of the inner world and your current state of relationships and even the outer world in general? Or maybe between the criticisms stemming from your inner world hijacking the mystery of what others might actually think of you? It sort of reminded me of this one friend that I had, and I'm gonna go on a tangent real quick. So I've built rapport with one of my friends while I was still in college, and we clicked, we bantered, we met at the lounge before lab, we talked about writing, we went hiking at a state park, etc., etc. And then one day, she just disappeared, and for a few months, she didn't even contact me. And when we were on campus, she would pretend that she didn't even see me, and she didn't even respond to my various food porn texts. And I don't really want to get into that too much, but I happened to bump into her at a Target of all places. And then I asked her why she hasn't been saying anything. And after some convincing, she sort of pretty much said that she was afraid of messing up the friendship because there were things going on in her personal life. I mean, we're pretty cool now, although I'm not really sure why every relationship that I've had was fixed at a Target, but that's another conversation for another time. Anyways, I say this to bring up some things to consider. You do tend to have a habit of making contingency plans if you feel like something is wrong. Again, nothing wrong with that. I mean, people will make precautions to keep themselves safe. But I suppose the questions that emerge from this are those precautions justified? I suppose a more visceral question would be, why are these precautions happening in the first place? Like, where in the world did they come from? The nature of intuition is valuable, but it will only go so far as to give you a strong sense of what you should do, but it seems like it would struggle to tell you precisely why. And in figuring out why, that answer might not come to you even after you might have thought you did after, several conclusions. And in my experience, the realization usually shows up in silence and in surprise. So here are some other things that I'll bring up as a sort of a direct response to what Pukoki said in her video. About the lack of a permanent male figure, which I will go on a limb here and also add to it a subsequent disruption in the familial bond. Yeah, I mean, this is a really tough one. I mean, I resonate with everyone who's going through this, and it's really unfortunate, especially for younger people, because if this is the domestic environment that you are constantly exposed to, it does so much damage to the development of a young person, especially since young people are so receptive to the environment around them. All I can say here is that constantly examining the situation and separating yourself from it tended to help. And you don't always have to look for an answer. It's just that understanding the situation is often enough. But this is also from personal experience. Also, the part about self-sabotage and waiting for the other person to take the active role in ending the relationship. Right here, I'm detecting that there is something blocking you from enforcing boundaries. I wouldn't pinpoint this on behavior as much as the resonance of the boundary itself. There comes a point where you refine and re-refine what works for you and what doesn't, up to a point where it speaks to you so much that you have no choice but to enforce it. And so the behavior to enforce that boundary would just come naturally. And as you may notice, this video did not touch upon how to attract another person or what to look for in another person, or even mention the other person at all. And that's because personally I really resonate with the understanding that once you really figure yourself out, then your preferences and aversions will come up naturally. And at that point, if you really want a genuine relationship that will last, then it will come just as effortlessly as the obstacles that keep that dream from coming to you. And as you may also notice, I did not give you any straight answers, and that's because I learned that if I were to give my friends a piece of advice, they'll very likely listen but not do anything about it. If my advice actually worked, my circle of acquaintances would just reduce to a really small fraction. And I suppose I'll end this with one more thing. I've learned recently that some problems I've dealt with lingered in my thoughts for a long time. And no matter how many times I processed and reasoned my way out of them, they would constantly come back. It was only when I looked at it with the language of prose and metaphors and symbols and poetic cadence did I start to see connections that resonated, and the chatter in my head started to quiet down for good. It's not there yet, but I can say with confidence that things are a whole lot better than they were like 5 years ago. And this is speaking about like my own inner world as well. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Maybe you'll get something out of it, maybe you won't. I don't know, I just felt like this video was just thrown together. Oh shit, I need to make a video on the ISFJ female.